Commander Zextai of the Corthanian Defense Fleet stared at the tactical display with the same weary expression he'd worn for the past 30 cycles. The holographic battlefield showed the familiar dance of death between his ships and the Vorthak swarm. Red dots chasing blue dots in an endless spiral of destruction that had consumed both civilizations for over 2,000 years. "Status report," he commanded, his 4 arms manipulating the control interfaces with practiced efficiency. His chitinous exoskeleton bore the scars of countless battles, each mark a testament to the futility of their struggle. "Sector 77 holding steady, sir," reported his tactical officer, her voice carrying the exhaustion that had become endemic among their people. "The swarm lost 3 dreadnoughts, but they've already begun reconstructing them from the debris field. Our projections show they'll be operational again within 6 rotations." Zextai's mandibles clicked in frustration. This was the nature of their war. A cosmic stalemate where victory was impossible and defeat merely delayed. The Corthanian Empire and the Vorthak swarm had fought for so long that neither species remembered what had started the conflict. Their entire civilizations had been built around the singular purpose of war, their technologies advancing only to create better ways to kill each other. The Vorthak were a hive-minded insectoid species that could rapidly regenerate their forces from fallen biomass. They fought with living ships that could heal themselves and weapons that grew stronger by consuming enemy technology. The Corthani had responded by developing quantum-hardened defenses and reality-anchored weapons that could permanently destroy Vorthak biomatter. But for every advancement one side made, the other adapted. It was an arms race that had spiraled beyond all reason, consuming entire star systems in its wake. Both civilizations had long ago abandoned their homeworlds, transforming themselves into nomadic war machines that drifted through space, locked in eternal combat. "Sir, we're detecting an anomaly in the neutral zone," the sensor operator announced, her voice carrying a note of surprise that hadn't been heard on the bridge in years. Zextai's primary eyes focused on the display. The neutral zone was a stretch of space between the 2 fleets where neither side ventured, a graveyard of destroyed ships from both civilizations that served as a grim reminder of their mutual destruction. "Define anomaly," he ordered. "Unknown contact, sir. Small vessel, approximately 40 meters in length. Energy signature doesn't match Vorthak biopatterns or any known Corthani design." For the first time in decades, Zextai felt something other than weary resignation. Throughout the galaxy, only 2 spacefaring civilizations were known to exist, themselves and the Vorthak. Every other species they'd encountered had either been absorbed by the swarm or had fled to distant regions of space to avoid the eternal war. "Communication from the Vorthak fleet, sir," the communications officer reported. "Queen Mind Zekth requests immediate ceasefire to investigate the unknown contact." Zextai's 4 eyes widened in surprise. A ceasefire request from the swarm was unprecedented. The Queen Mind must be equally intrigued by this development. "Granted. Open a channel to the alien vessel." The main screen flickered to life, showing the interior of what appeared to be a primitive but functional spacecraft. The being that appeared was unlike anything in their databases, bipedal, with soft skin instead of chitin, and only 2 eyes positioned on a relatively small head. It was remarkably fragile-looking compared to both the armored Corthani and the bio-enhanced Vorthak. "Greetings," the alien said in surprisingly clear galactic standard, though with an odd accent. "I am Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth vessel Endeavor. I represent the United Nations of Earth. We've been observing your conflict from the edge of this system and would like to open diplomatic relations with both civilizations." Zextai exchanged glances with his officers. The name Earth meant nothing to them, and the concept of diplomatic relations seemed almost archaic. How could this primitive being not understand the reality of their situation? "I am Commander Zextai of the Corthanian Defense Fleet. he responded formally. "You have entered a combat zone between two enemy civilizations. For your safety, I recommend you withdraw immediately." The human, for that's what she had called her species, smiled, an expression that neither the Korthani nor the Vorthak possessed. "Thank you for the warning, Commander, but we're not here to run away. We've been studying your conflict for several months, and we believe we might be able to help." Before Zextai could respond, a new voice cut across the channel. The screen split to show the horrific visage of Queen Mind Zeketh, her biomechanical form writhing with living components and dripping with the acidic secretions that marked her royal status among the swarm. "Soft Flesh speaks of help," the Queen Mind hissed, her voice a harmony of clicking mandibles and psychic projection. "Soft Flesh knows nothing of the Great War. Soft Flesh should flee before becoming biomass for the swarm's growth." Captain Chen turned to address the Queen Mind directly, showing no fear despite facing one of the most terrifying beings in the galaxy. "Your Majesty, with respect, we've been observing your war for generations. Our ancestors first detected the energy signatures of your battles over 200 years ago. We've studied the patterns, the strategies, the technologies involved." "Then you understand the futility of intervention," Zextai said. "This war cannot be stopped. It can only be endured." "That's where you're wrong," Chen replied calmly. "Every war can be stopped. Sometimes you just need a fresh perspective from someone who isn't caught up in the fighting." The Queen Mind's form rippled with what might have been amusement. "Soft Flesh believes it can succeed where two mighty civilizations have failed for millennia. The swarm is curious about this delusion." "We don't claim to be mightier than either of your civilizations," Chen said, "but we have something you've both forgotten in your endless war." "And what is that?" Zextai asked, despite himself. "Hope," she replied simply, "and the memory of what it's like to not be at war." Zextai felt something stir within him, an emotion he couldn't quite name. He looked at his bridge crew and saw the same expression on their faces. When was the last time any of them had imagined a universe without war? When had they last contemplated any purpose beyond the next battle? "The swarm has forgotten nothing," Queen Mind Zekth declared, but there was something in her psychic emanations that suggested uncertainty. "The swarm remembers the necessity of survival, the imperative of growth, the—" "When did your people last create something beautiful?" Chen interrupted gently. "Not a weapon, not a tool of war, but something purely for the joy of creation?" The question hung in space between the three vessels like a challenge. Neither commander had an answer. "We have a proposal," Chen continued. "Give us 72 hours. Let us show you what we've learned about your conflict and what we think might be possible if you're willing to try something different. If you're not interested after that, we'll leave and never return." Zextai found himself considering the offer seriously, which surprised him. Logic dictated that this was a waste of time at best, a trap at worst. But something about the human's certainty, her unshakable belief that their situation could change, sparked something in him that he thought had died long ago. "The swarm agrees to this delay," Queen Mind Zekth announced, her biomechanical form pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that indicated deep thought. "But if Soft Flesh fails, Soft Flesh becomes part of the next assault wave." "Understood," Chen replied without hesitation. "Commander Zextai, do we have an agreement?" Zextai looked at his tactical display one more time, at the endless dance of destruction that had defined his entire existence. For the first time in his life, he wondered what would happen if the music stopped. 72 hours, he agreed. "But human, understand this. We have tried everything. Diplomacy, truces, negotiation, compromise, all have failed. The war is all we know now, all we are." Captain Chen's smile widened, and somehow it made her appear less fragile and more formidable than before. Commander, with respect, you haven't tried everything. You've only tried solutions that two civilizations at war could think of. Sometimes the answer comes from someone who's never been part of the problem. As the communication ended and both fleets settled into an uneasy ceasefire, Zexatai couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. For the first time in 2 millennia, the eternal war had paused, and in that pause, impossible things might become possible. The human solution. 24 hours into the ceasefire, Captain Sarah Chen stood in the main conference room of the human vessel Endeavour, surrounded by holographic projections that filled the space with swirling galaxies of data. The room itself was modest compared to the massive warships of either the Korthani or Vorthak fleets, but what it lacked in size, it made up for in sophisticated analysis equipment that had been specifically designed for this mission. Commander Zextai and Queen Mind Zekth appeared as full-sized holograms on opposite sides of the room, maintaining their traditional adversarial positions even in this neutral space. Both alien leaders watched with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity as Chen manipulated the data displays with practiced efficiency. For the past 200 years, humanity has been watching your war, Chen began, her voice steady and professional. At first, we thought we were observing a standard territorial conflict that would eventually resolve itself. It took us nearly 50 years to realize that this wasn't a war in any conventional sense. It was something entirely unprecedented in galactic history. She gestured to the largest display, which showed a time-lapse animation of the conflict spanning the last millennium. Red and blue dots danced across star maps in patterns that seemed almost choreographed in their complexity. "You're not fighting a war," Chen continued. "You're performing one. Look at these movement patterns, these battle formations, these response times. There's a mathematical beauty to it that goes far beyond military necessity." Zextai's mandibles clicked in confusion. "Performance? We are engaged in total warfare for the survival of our species." "Are you?" Chen challenged gently. "When was the last time either side made a serious attempt to completely destroy the other? Not just win battles or capture territory, but actually end this conflict through total victory?" Queen Mind Zekth's biomechanical form rippled with agitation. "The swarm seeks total consumption of Korthani essence. This has always been the goal." "No," Chen said, pulling up another display that showed casualty rates over time. "Look at these numbers. Both of your civilizations have developed regeneration technologies that ensure your populations remain stable despite constant warfare. The Vorthak can reproduce from biomass. The Korthani have perfected cloning and consciousness transfer. You're not trying to destroy each other. You're trying to sustain each other." The silence that followed was profound. Both commanders stared at the data with expressions of growing comprehension and horror. "That's impossible," Zextai whispered. "We hate them. They are our eternal enemy." "Do you?" Chen asked. "Or have you defined yourselves so completely by this conflict that you can't imagine existence without it?" She brought up a new set of displays showing technological development patterns for both civilizations. "Look at this. Every advance one side makes is perfectly countered by the other within decades. It's not coincidence. It's unconscious collaboration. You've been locked in an evolutionary dance for so long that you've become dependent on each other for continued growth." Queen Mind Zekth's psychic emanations had taken on a disturbed quality. "The swarm exists to consume and grow. Without the challenge of Korthani resistance, what would be the purpose of—" She stopped abruptly, as if the thought was too terrible to complete. "That's the real tragedy," Chen said softly. "You've both forgotten who you were before the war. Your entire cultures, your technologies, your sense of purpose, everything has been shaped by this conflict for so long that you've lost your original identities." Zexatai slumped in his command harness, the weight of realization settling over him like a physical burden. 2,000 years of fighting, And we've achieved nothing but the perpetuation of fighting itself. Not nothing, Chen corrected. You've achieved something remarkable even if it wasn't intentional. You've created the most sophisticated military technologies in the galaxy, developed incredible resilience and adaptability, and proved that two civilizations can coexist in a stable system even under extreme conditions. Coexist? Queen Mind Zekth's voice carried a note of bitter humor. We destroy each other's fleets daily. And then you rebuild them, Chen pointed out. Perfect enemies, locked in perfect balance. It's actually a form of symbiosis, though neither of you recognized it. She gestured to a new display showing economic and resource flows. The Vorthak provide biomass for regeneration when Korthani forces are destroyed, and the Korthani provide technological challenges that drive Vorthak evolution. You've been supporting each other's growth for millennia. This is disturbing, Zextai admitted. But even if your analysis is correct, what does it change? We cannot simply stop fighting. Our people know no other way of life. That's where humanity comes in, Chen said, her expression brightening. We've spent the last century developing something called Project Synthesis. It's based on our own history of ending conflicts that seemed impossible to resolve. She brought up images of Earth's history. Wars, treaties, the gradual development of international cooperation, and eventual global unity. Humans have fought countless wars throughout our history. We've hated each other for reasons of race, religion, resources, ideology. But we learned something that you've forgotten. The most powerful force in the universe isn't destruction, it's cooperation. Soft Flesh speaks of cooperation while Swarm and Korthani burn each other's fleets, Queen Mind Zekth observed. Because you've never had a common goal beyond war, Chen explained. But what if you did? What if there was something that required the combined strengths of both your civilizations to achieve? Zextai leaned forward, his attention fully focused now. What kind of goal? Chen smiled and gestured to the largest display, which now showed a three-dimensional map of the galaxy with vast dark regions marked in ominous black. Are you familiar with the Void Plague? Both commanders recoiled instinctively. The Void Plague was a phenomenon that had been spreading across the galaxy for the past 500 years, regions of space where reality itself seemed to break down, consuming entire star systems and leaving nothing but empty void behind. Our analysis suggests that the plague isn't a natural phenomenon, Chen continued. It's the result of dimensional instabilities caused by concentrated conflict. The more warfare occurs in a region, the more likely it is to develop void zones. You're suggesting our war is causing the plague? Zextai asked, his voice hollow. Not directly, but your conflict is the largest concentration of destructive energy in the galaxy. The space-time distortions from 2 millennia of battle have been building up, and they're starting to tear holes in reality itself. Queen Mind Zekth's biomechanical form pulsed with rapid calculations. If this is true, then the war that has sustained the Swarm is ultimately destroying everything the Swarm seeks to consume. The math checks out, Chen confirmed. At current rates, the Void will reach both your fleets within 500 years. Unless something changes dramatically, both civilizations will be consumed by the very conflict that defined them. But you said you had a solution, Zextai said urgently. We do. The same technologies that have made your war so destructive can be used to repair the damage it's caused. Vorthak bioengineering combined with Korthani quantum manipulation could theoretically stabilize the dimensional fractures and begin healing the void zones. The implications hung in the air like a challenge. Both commanders were quiet for long moments, processing the magnitude of what Chen was proposing. You're asking us to work together, Queen Mind Zeketh finally said, to combine our technologies and resources toward a common goal. I'm asking you to save the galaxy, Chen replied simply, including yourselves. The technical challenges would be immense, Zextai mused. Our technologies are completely incompatible. Our people have been trained to see each other as monsters. Which is why it would take time, Chen acknowledged. Probably decades to develop the necessary cooperation protocols, to retrain your people, to integrate your technologies. But humanity is offering to help mediate the process. Why? Queen Mind Zekth asked suspiciously. What does humanity gain from this intervention? Chen's expression grew serious. A galaxy that doesn't tear itself apart. You see, your war isn't just affecting you anymore. The dimensional distortions are spreading, threatening other civilizations, including ours. We could try to run, find another galaxy to inhabit, but we'd rather fix the problem at its source. And if we refuse? Zextai asked. Then in 500 years, there won't be anyone left to remember that this conversation ever took place, Chen replied soberly. The choice is yours, evolution or extinction. The weight of decision pressed down on both commanders. For the first time in their adult lives, they faced a choice that extended beyond the next battle, beyond the eternal dance of war that had defined their existence. The swarm requires time to process this information, Queen Mind Zekth announced. To consult with the collective consciousness and evaluate all possibilities. As do the Korthani High Command, Zextai added. This proposal would require fundamental changes to our entire civilization. Understood, Chen nodded. But remember, you still have 48 hours left in our agreement. And I have one more thing to show you. Something that might help you understand what's truly possible when former enemies become allies. The New Beginning. The final hours of the 72-hour ceasefire found the three vessels positioned at the edge of a small void zone, one of the growing tiers in reality that threatened to consume everything they knew. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the Endeavour, watching as representatives from both the Korthanian and Vorthak fleets worked together for the first time in recorded history. The sight was extraordinary. Korthani engineers in their quantum-hardened exoskeletons worked alongside Vorthak biotechnicians, their living tools interfacing with crystalline Korthani computers in ways that should have been impossible. The language barriers had been overcome through a combination of mathematical formulas, universal engineering principles, and the surprisingly effective human talent for translation. Preliminary readings are encouraging, reported Dr. Marcus Webb, Chen's chief science officer. The hybrid bioquantum resonators are actually generating stable field harmonics. If this keeps up, we might be looking at the first successful void zone stabilization in galactic history. Chen nodded, watching as Commander Zextai and Queen Mind Zekth coordinated their team's efforts. The transformation in both leaders had been remarkable. The bone-deep weariness that had marked their earlier interactions had been replaced by something Chen recognized as professional excitement. For the first time in millennia, they were building instead of destroying. Contact from the test teams, Webb continued. They're ready for the initial stabilization attempt. The next few minutes would determine whether 2,000 years of warfare could be transformed into cooperation, or whether the galaxy would continue its slide toward total dissolution. Chen activated the communication system that linked all three vessels. All stations, this is Captain Chen. We are go for Operation Synthesis. Korthani teams, begin quantum field generation. Vorthak teams, initialize bioresonance patterns. Human teams, monitor all interactions and be ready to adjust parameters. On the main display, the void zone appeared as a region of absolute nothingness, not black space with distant stars, but a complete absence that hurt to look at directly. The zone was relatively small, only a few kilometers across, but it represented something far more terrifying than any weapon either civilization had ever created. Quantum field generators online, Zextai reported, his voice carrying a note of professional pride. Field stability at 97% and holding. Bioresonance pattern established. Queen Mind Zekth added, her psychic emanations unusually calm. Living networks responding to quantum harmonics. Integration successful. Chen watched the readings with growing amazement. The hybrid technology was working better than anyone had dared hope. Vorthak bioengineering was adapting in real time to the quantum structures, while Korthani technology was learning to interface with living systems in ways that enhanced both components. Field interaction achieving resonance, Webb announced. The void zone is beginning to respond. Reality distortion decreasing by 0.03% per second. It was a tiny change, barely detectable on their instruments, but it represented something unprecedented in galactic history. The seemingly irreversible damage caused by millennia of warfare was actually beginning to heal. Remarkable, Zextai breathed, his sensors showing him data he'd never imagined possible. The quantum matrices are not just stabilizing reality, they're actively repairing the dimensional fabric. The swarm concurs, Queen Mind Zeketh added, her biomechanical form pulsing with patterns that indicated deep satisfaction. The living networks are growing stronger through their interaction with Korthani quantum structures. This symbiosis enhances both technologies beyond their individual capabilities. Chen felt a surge of hope that she tried to keep from showing in her voice. How long do you estimate complete stabilization will take? At current rates, approximately 6 standard days, Zextai calculated. But Commander, if we can stabilize one void zone, and if this technology can be scaled up and mass-produced, we could heal the entire galaxy, Queen Mind Zekth finished, her psychic emanations carrying something that might have been wonder. The swarm begins to understand the true scope of this possibility. The next several hours passed in intense coordination between the three fleets. The success of the initial test had energized everyone involved, and Chen watched with growing admiration as former enemies worked together with increasing efficiency. The Korthani brought precise engineering and mathematical perfection to the project, while the Vorthak contributed adaptive biological systems and quantum biological interfaces that no synthetic technology could match. But it was more than just technical cooperation that amazed her. She observed moments of genuine curiosity between the species, Korthani engineers asking about biotechnical processes, Vorthak specialists showing interest in quantum crystalline structures. After 2 millennia of seeing each other only as targets to be destroyed, they were beginning to see each other as fellow beings with valuable knowledge and skills. "Captain," Dr. Webb called from his station, "I'm reading some unusual energy signatures from both fleets. It looks like they're powering down weapon systems and redirecting energy to manufacturing facilities." Chen checked her instruments and smiled. Both fleets were beginning the massive process of converting from war production to the construction of void-healing technology. It would take years to complete the transformation, but the process had begun. "Captain Chen," Commander Zextai's voice carried a formal tone that made her pause. "The Korthani High Command has reached a decision regarding your proposal. As has the Swarm Collective," Queen Mind Zekth added, her biomechanical form arranged in what Chen had learned was a posture of respect among her people. Chen felt her heart rate increase despite her professional calm. Everything hinged on this moment. "The Korthanian Empire formally accepts the alliance proposal," Zextai announced. "We recognize that our civilization faces extinction unless we embrace cooperation over conflict. We pledge our resources and knowledge to the healing of the galaxy." "The Vorthak swarm concurs with this decision," Queen Mind Zekth added. "The collective consciousness has evaluated all possibilities and concludes that symbiosis offers greater evolutionary potential than parasitism. We commit our biotechnological capabilities to this endeavor." Chen felt tears forming in her eyes, a human emotional response that neither alien species possessed, but which somehow seemed appropriate for this moment. On behalf of humanity and the United Nations of Earth, she replied formally, I accept your alliance. Together, we will heal the wounds that warfare has carved into reality itself. The months that followed became known in galactic history as the Great Transition. The transformation wasn't easy. Millennia of hatred and suspicion couldn't be overcome overnight, and there were incidents where old conflicts threatened to reignite. But each success in healing a void zone reinforced the value of cooperation, and gradually the three civilizations learned to work as a unified force. The Korthani discovered that their rigid military efficiency was perfectly suited to large-scale engineering projects, and they threw themselves into the construction of massive void-healing installations with the same dedication they had once applied to warfare. The Vorthak found that their adaptive biotechnology could evolve solutions to problems that conventional engineering couldn't solve, and their hive-mind coordination proved invaluable for managing complex multi-system operations. Humanity's contribution proved to be something neither of the older civilizations had expected. Humans excelled at the art of translation, not just between languages, but between fundamentally different ways of thinking and approaching problems. When Korthani precision clashed with Vorthak adaptability, humans found ways to bridge the gap and create solutions that incorporated the strengths of both approaches. 5 years after first contact, the three species had successfully stabilized over 200 void zones and were well on their way to healing the larger tiers in reality. The technology had evolved far beyond the initial prototypes, incorporating advances that none of the three species could have achieved alone. More importantly, all three civilizations had begun to remember who they were beyond war. The Korthani rediscovered their love of mathematics and crystal art, creating beautiful geometric structures that served both aesthetic and functional purposes. The Vorthak returned to their original nature as gardeners of life, using their biotechnology to restore dead worlds and create new ecosystems. Humanity found itself serving as mediators and bridge builders throughout the galaxy, a role that seemed perfectly suited to their nature. Commander Zextai, now bearing the title of Chief Engineer of the Galactic Restoration Project, stood beside Captain Chen on the observation deck of a massive joint species station orbiting the site of what had once been the galaxy's largest void zone. Where once there had been only nothingness, now space sparkled with newly formed stars and planets, realities reborn through the application of cooperative technology. Do you ever regret it? Chen asked quietly. Giving up the certainty of war for the uncertainty of peace? Zexatai's mandibles clicked in what she had learned was the Korthani equivalent of gentle laughter. Captain, for 2,000 years my people knew exactly what each day would bring: battle, destruction, and the endless cycle of warfare. We thought that certainty gave our lives meaning. He gestured to the display showing their latest success, a cluster of planets where the first generation of tri-species colonies was taking root, with Korthani, Vorthak, and human families living and working together. But we confused certainty with purpose, he continued. True purpose isn't about knowing what will happen tomorrow. It's about working toward something better than what exists today. For the first time in millennia, we have a future worth building toward. Queen Mind Zekth materialized as a hologram beside them, her biomechanical form now decorated with crystalline Korthani art that grew alongside her living components in a beautiful fusion of both species' aesthetics. The swarm concurs, she said, her psychic emanations carrying warm harmonics that would have been impossible during the war years. We spent so long consuming and growing that we forgot the joy of creating and nurturing. The galaxy is vast enough for endless growth, but only if that growth serves to build rather than destroy. Chen smiled as she watched a mixed group of young beings from all three species playing together in the station's recreational area. They were the first generation to grow up without war, and they moved between the three cultures with an ease that their parents still envied. You know, she said thoughtfully, humanity had a saying, "It takes a village to raise a child." I think we've just proven that sometimes it takes an entire galaxy to raise a civilization. The war that had seemed eternal had indeed ended, not through victory or defeat, but through the recognition that some challenges were too great for any single species to face alone. The galaxy was healing, and in healing it, 3 civilizations had discovered that their greatest strength lay not in their weapons, but in their willingness to build something beautiful together.